Hi, everyone. About this like intimate setting. Not like it's good coming. Truly, thank you for coming out. You so much to me. I'm going back to LA yesterday with Carpenter. And if one person shows it's gonna be worth it. So to see your faces here is truly like brings me so much joy, and I'm just so grateful. I can't wait to get to know you more after we put that. If you have a few minutes, I won't be up here for forever, chatting your ear off. So afterwards, I'd love to actually get some one-on-one time to just like know your name, and if you're in the launch team, will you raise your hand? Does anyone? Okay, I was like, okay, I feel like I recognize faces. So thanks. And those of you who aren't in launch team, that just means so much. Did you hear about the event through my Facebook post or through Baker posting about it or Instagram? Cool. Okay, Baker. Awesome. Well, thanks for showing up. For those who might not be super familiar with me, I'll just tell you a very short little bit about me. My name is Carpenter, and I am a writer, a speaker, and an advocate. I can now say I'm an author, which is just so cool. I'm so excited. To know means to know. I go pretty much everywhere with an iced mocha, preferably local coffee shops, but I did get to I need to get all the recommendations for your local coffee shop. And I had no idea there was a coffee shop there. But I am from the South Bend, Indiana area, so I am a born and raised Midwest gal, and I'm living in LA right now with my husband, so that's a huge culture shock, a huge change. We've been there 1 year. We're there because he is also a writer, but he is a writer for pop music, so we are in very different spaces, but it's really fun that we get to kind of help each other and talk creative process. Again, for those who don't know me just a little bit more, I actually went to school to be a public school teacher, so that's what my degree is in. And I realized that I love kids and I love teaching, but I wasn't made to have those in the same room. So bless you if you're a teacher. I have all the respect in the world. I taught high school Spanish, 6th grade general education, 4th grade general education, 1st grade gen ed, and then I retired. I took a year off and said, I don't know what's next, but I'm just gonna try something different, to experiment. And honestly, in many ways, that was the beginning of this journey. I've always kind of been someone who enjoyed writing on the side. I had a blog, I did a WordPress blog with my name, and wasn't necessarily trying to build something then, just really enjoyed processing things that I was learning, things that God was teaching me. And so I published, and sometimes it resonated and sometimes it didn't. But over time, consistently showing up, and you get built trust with people. And so some of you have been following maybe for a long time, which again, I think what we're going to do is actually talk about this now. If you can't tell, I get a little nervous. This is the most vulnerable thing I have ever created. I create a lot. I've created courses. I wrote a different book. I was emotional that I self-published. And there was vulnerability in all of those things, but nothing is quite like me standing naked in front of you like this one. Like this is me bearing my soul, bearing the worst parts of myself. In fact, if I were to retitle it, I'd probably call it telling on myself, because I do so much of that in this book. Can I ask if anyone has gotten a chance to read it? A little bit? Okay, so I don't want to totally spoil it, but there's a lot in here. There is things that we would classify as either big sin or really consequential, and then there's things in here that I think everybody struggles with and can relate to on some level. Again, I don't want to spoil it, but this might be a little bit of spoiler. Okay? Giving you that. I had not found a Christian book where the woman was writing from her perspective about having an affair, about being unfaithful in her marriage. And that was very scary because that's part of my story. And I needed to include that. I couldn't write this book. I couldn't tell you how I've learned to care for my soul and the journey that God has taken me on unless I was willing to expose the mess that God brought me out of. And the reality is, I felt like I need to go first. And I didn't find any books on the shelf where a woman exposed that. I got a lot of books where women were saying, my husband has had an affair or this has happened. And I think it honestly actually made me feel more shame. I already felt shame for the mistake I had made, for all the mistakes in my life that I've made. But then specifically always seeing it told by the other gender, by the male, by the female talking about a male doing it, just actually made me feel more isolated and alone. And so one of my hopes with this book is that I get to go first and I get to say, you're not alone in the struggles you have, in the mistakes that you make. And if you're sitting there going like, no, I doubt she really gets older. Like, I get so vulnerable. Like, that has been the piece of feedback. Well, it looks out 1 week today, yay. And the people that have gotten to read it, people that were in my launch team that got to read it early, that has been the overwhelming feedback. And it's just vulnerable. Like, you really put it all out there. And I didn't just do that for nothing. Cost a lot. Actually, there's people chat about that too, and I'll take questions at the end. And I'd love to like dialogue and not have the other little but I did it on purpose. I did it because I wanted to be able to go first for somebody else that either is presently experiencing the same struggles I once was a part of or struggling through, who feels shame, who needs to know that not only are they not alone, but that they're going to get there is hope on the other side. I'm going to read a short passage if that's okay. And then we'll find where I should have it. Right. I'm in the wrong chapter now. By the way, for those of you who enjoy memoirs, my book very much does read like a memoir. The first 3 chapters, especially, you're going to sense that a lot. And not that there's a hard shift, but if you're in the book talk for you, I really wanted these first 3 chapters to, like I said, expose some of my hardships and my struggles. Because I don't want the book to feel like it's preaching at you. I want it to sound like a friend who's just grabbing you by the shoulder saying, please don't make the same mistakes as me. Or if you have, you're going to get through this. There is hope. And again, I felt like I needed to lay it all out there in order for that to actually land. Okay. This isn't the first chapter. So I also did not follow the Christian formula for how to write a book. One day I committed what I believed was the unforgivable sin of infidelity. I allowed one man to cross the much needed but seriously lacking boundary lines in my life. He probably knew what he was doing all along, but I did not. I wasn't aware until it was too late. And that's precisely the problem. I couldn't believe what happened, but as I retraced my steps, it was so obvious, which made me feel even more ashamed. There were no excuses or ways to justify it. My unawareness of the sin I was entangled in led me to make the biggest mistake of my life. All along were red flags I'd ignored, and had I been living consciously, they could have served as major stop signs. Things such as how often he complimented me, how much I enjoyed his attention, how often he communicated with me despite knowing I was married, how I hid certain things about him and our friendship from my husband, how he gave me gifts and crossed the line on what an appropriate friendship looks like between 2 heterosexual people of the opposite sex, how I went out of my way to make him happy, the overall amount of time and energy both he and I invested in each other. All of it was inappropriate. None of it was no big deal, as I have been telling myself all along. I am now convinced there is no such thing as harmless flirting when you're married. I now hold the belief that if we have to hide something from our spouse, it's wrong. With and about it. In the aftermath of what occurred, I promised myself to never be so ignorant or heedless ever again. I was finally aware of my shadow side because I saw the shadow once the light poured in. I was addicted to affirmation from men. I started going to individual counseling and brought this new self-knowledge to my counselor. However, I did not tell her or anyone about the event that had taken place that had ultimately awakened me to this awareness. I thought it was a secret I would take to my grave. Oh, that is honestly where this story begins. It begins with me, a woman who was trying to follow Jesus, who did have a relationship with God. I'm going to make sense if you're like, wait, what? How do you have an affair when you're relationship with God? That doesn't add up. I get it. I think our journeys with God are similar to our journeys of healing. They're not linear. And what I realized was that in my relationship with God, there was a maturity that was lacking, and there were habits that needed change. Habits don't change overnight. Just because you get to know God or you start going to church and you start changing your life, habits don't just change overnight. And there are certain things and habits that we don't even know maybe that are going on or we're not aware of until things happen, bad things happen. And so much of that is true for me. I talk about this a little bit in the book, but it's not like when I got married, suddenly I became a different person and I was this woman who could be faithful. There's actually evidence of this all along in prior relationships. And even if you go back to my childhood, there's evidence of the struggle, this need for affirmation from men, and this sin that would have hold on me. The thing is, though, it had laid sort of dormant. You know, when you just think you're like healed with something, or that something is no longer a struggle or a temptation, because maybe circumstantially everything's kind of perfect. And so it's not until the circumstances shift and things aren't so perfect that you're like, whoa, that part of me is back. I didn't know I could be that person again. Ooh, that's the ugly side of me. I think what had happened was we had sort of this perfect storm. And I don't say that to excuse or to justify it, just to give you some context. When we first married, my husband said, I don't know if I believe in God anymore, but you know, our church, and we went through. I was a new Christian, and I was like, wait, are we getting divorced then? What does this mean? I'm the person who tells it all, so I'll just say it all. Our sex life was hard. What I thought was about to be our, marriage, happy ending, beautiful thing, started to feel like a huge mistake. And so this perfect storm sets me up so that when somebody else comes along and they say, you are beautiful, and I feel disconnected from my husband, I don't even know if we're going to be together anymore. He doesn't believe in God. I don't know what that means for me. There's this massive just mess, honestly. Again, it's not like something new happened. What was always there beneath the surface throughout my entire life reared its head, and that person got my attention, and I made some really destructive decisions. And I don't talk about this a lot, but it's really what sets up what I'm about to, where we're about to go, and then we'll go to questions and all of that. But what I want you to know is that no one wakes up one day and says, today's the day I'm gonna have an affair. No one wakes up one day and says, today's the day I'm an alcoholic, or I'm gonna get a DUI. No one wakes up one day and says, today's the day I'm gonna steal money. We don't make big and small ways. We don't make destructive decisions for our life. We don't wake up one day and decide that. It's not like a conscious thing to do. It happens when little by little over time, sin creeps in, and we aren't living in a state of awareness and consciousness and wholeness in a relationship with God, where we're not aware of our voice, the parts of ourselves that is actually where God wants to meet us and have the deepest, most intimate relationship with us. If we're not aware of those things, little by little, things can happen. So similar to my story, maybe you know someone, maybe you're thinking of yourself, where there's just been times where you've gotten to a point in your life where you're like, how did I get here? friendship fallout, a different relational fallout, would be totally different. The examples are truly endless. And I think what I want to emphasize before we kind of go a little bit further is this book is not just for people who have massive struggle in their life or who have created like super destructive, or I should say, it's not just for people who, like me, have made a bad choice that's really devastating. It's for all of us. We all have sin. None of us is perfect. It's for someone who struggles with gossiping and just wants to stop repeating the same mistakes over and over again. Wants to learn how to connect with people without ever putting someone else down, without ever talking about someone else. It's for the person who wants to be healthy in their body physically just as much as they are emotionally. It's all of these things. And I think our spiritual health and the church, sometimes we compartmentalize. We only focus on one area. And I think God desires a healed, whole version of us physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally. And it doesn't always look like one thing. So don't come up with an image in your mind and get married to that. I think it's unique. Just like our relationships with each other are unique. Like you may have a friend that you have another friend who's friends with, like mutual friends. Your relationship with that person is going to look different than their relationship with that other friend. In the same way, I think we get this copy paste, like your relationship with God should look like this, and my relationship with God looks like this. I don't think that's working. At least it didn't for me. My relationship with God, the more exciting and joyful and intimate and real it has become, the more it looks, honestly, probably weird to some people. And this book talks about it a little bit, but I was definitely taught to believe that in order to grow spiritually, in order to be my best self, in order to grow spiritually, be close to God, be my best self, I needed to look a certain way, show up a certain way, read my Bible, sing the right worship songs, do not say a swear word. It was like, it's all task driven. And that did not lead me to the place that I am today. That led me down the destructive path. And so coming out of that, this full care journey, the subtitle is How Radical Honesty Leads to Real Healing. For me, it's been a journey of what does it look like to actually be healed and free, and for this to not be me striving to modify my behavior, to live up to a certain standard or a perceived notion of who I'm supposed to be. What does it look like, though, instead, for me to be in a real relationship with God? And what I found was that I think the modern day American church doesn't always spend a lot of time talking about things like confession and really vulnerable intimate relationships with each other. There's a verse in James, and by the way, each chapter ends with a passage of scripture that ties in, and then 5 questions that help take your journey deeper. It's as if I'm sitting across from you saying, okay, we just had this conversation. Now let's one by one, I just want to spend some time letting you reflect, process this book. That's what those 5 questions are. I lost my train of thought. But this book, it wasn't necessarily the book I wanted to write, because it required me to expose the worst parts of myself. Like I just shared one of them. That's just one. Wait till you read it. But I could not write this book. It's the book that God called me to write, and I was sure of that. It's the book of a lot of things that everyone's making the book. We're all crazy. And even in just this first week of feedback, it's been incredible to hear. I have not felt like it's a lot of compliment or praise just for the sake of it. It's felt like people are like, oh my goodness, you made me feel so much less alone. I thought I was the only one. I'm so desperate for hope and freedom. You're telling me I won't have to live the same life, making the same mistakes and repeating the same sins over and over and over again for another 10 years? I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Take this seriously. Act on it. Try it. Even if you don't believe me, try it as an experiment. It continues to change my life. That's the beauty about soul care, is that it's not a one and done thing. It's not something to be able to check the box off on. But these are practices. Each chapter is a practice that I want to invite you into. And in case you haven't had a chance to look at the book, I'll share a couple of those practices and talk about them briefly. If you like Morgan Harper Nichols, she wrote the foreword. She's a beautiful artist. She's a friend of mine. We met when we were speaking at a conference together in January of 2019. And so I asked her if she'd write the foreword, and she did. But the practices, for example, the first practice for caring for your soul is, number one, identify your hidden secret. Now, that sounds really big, and I named a lot of big things when I first started sharing. But a hidden secret could be anything you wouldn't want someone to know about you. We're talking about the unseen inner workings of our soul. Not all the stuff that people post on social media or that people can see from the outside. Only you know if you're struggling with envy. Only you know if you're struggling with greed or lust or gluttony or whatever the case is. Identify your hidden secrets, because we can't change what we're not aware of. So that's that first soul-care practice. I will actually skip a few and go to another one. Soul-care practice number 5 is embrace embarrassment for the sake of freedom. That means a lot of different things. And the reason these soul-care practices aren't hyper-specific is because I actually want them to be accessible and relatable and attainable to your life, even though it's totally different from mine. I didn't want this to feel like a prescription, like you must take off of work every Saturday from 4 to 8 p.m. and Sabbath like this and write out a very detailed prescription. It's not going to apply to all of us. It's not accessible to everyone. That's also not what maybe your soul needs. Soul care is not prescriptive. It's not one size fits all. But I think the way that I try to boil down these practices are basically an invitation. Would you just try it? What would it look like maybe for you to start engaging in a life where these are lived out? And so that this one that I just mentioned, embrace embarrassment for the sake of freedom. I'm going to read one very short passage from that to get to it. Just because I think it really gives the emphasis of what I am talking about here. I really should have tabbed these sticky notes. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Sadly, a lot of us live so focused on hiding parts of ourselves, the parts that society deems weak, embarrassing, or unimpressive, that we never do the real work necessary for healing. Every day we attempt to hide broken pieces of our spirit and keep hidden the wounds of our soul. However, living in hiding is so much more exhausting than the healing we place on the back burner. I think that so often we really do think that the work to heal or the embarrassment that might come from us coming out about something and navigating that. And it's scary and it can be exhausting. But as someone who knows what it's like to live in hiding or feeling like I need to alter parts of myself around certain people. Oh, I'm too loud around them. Oh, I'm too quiet. I need to be this way. I mean, I've done both. I've done the boasting, kind of portray that I'm more confident than I am, and I've done the shrinking what actually. On some level, I know you're not just women here, but I think a lot of us as women can relate. It's hard to be who we were created to be, and so much of this is giving you permission, as I try to go first, in saying, here's a wonky journey. How I figured out who I was and how I'm learning to embrace that person and love her the way God loves her and see her the way God sees her and show up. Because when I show up fully as who God created me to be, not only is it freeing and much less exhausting, but it serves the world better. So much more than when I try to be someone I'm not and anxiety, I stress about running and being perceived a certain way. Yeah, this book sometimes has been hard for me to talk about not because of the vulnerable stuff that I shared earlier, but more so because how often do you find a book that like all of it is about what's unseen? It's not about the behavior we see on the outside. It's about the unseen. What's motivating you to do things you do, say things you say, be the person you are? Because you could look like you have this really amazing life on the outside, but God doesn't care about that. We read this in scripture. God cares about our hearts, the motives. This book addresses that. It's like basically for me, so much of the journey too was I had to pause all the things I was doing. I was so good at being a human doing, not a human being. We aren't human doing. The journey I revisit too is never over. There was a time I was serving at my church, which the outside looks great. Show up, love on kids, serve. Inside, I had the worst attitude. So I think sometimes God would rather you quit the good things you're doing and work on your attitude and just work on being with Him. Because I think sometimes we focus so much on doing for God that we miss out on being with God. And there's a saying that I learned from my church, and it goes like this, and it's changed my life. I wrote about it in the book too. We need to be with God so that doing the work of God doesn't kill the work of God in us. I'll say that again. We need to be with God so that doing the work of God doesn't kill the work of God in us. Doing the work of God could look like being a stay-at-home mom. Doing the work of God could look like showing up at your marketing job. Doing the work of God could look like being a good friend. Doing the work of God can look like so many different things. So don't think that's ministry specific or church specific. My hope is that this book will give you very practical steps towards looking inward, caring for your soul. I hope and pray that it protects you from making some of the mistakes that I've made, and just is like a friend who guides you towards healing, who walks that journey with you. If you've ever thought, I want a mentor, Manda, those who call me, I'm like, I talk about this a lot. If you ever thought, I want a mentor, I can't find one, or I haven't been able to find one. I'm not saying I can be everyone's mentor, nor should I be, but this book might be a great place to start. It might actually just provide structure with those 5 questions at the end of each chapter for you to sit down with someone, even a friend up here. It doesn't have to be a mentor who's seasoned and more experienced than you, although there's a huge gift in that. But it might just provide structure for you each to take turns responding to the questions and holding up a mirror for one another. I talk a lot about how we're all mirror holders for each other in this book as well. I don't have the time, so I'm going to stop rambling. So I want to have a conversation. I probably went on and on and on. I want to know what your thoughts are after hearing that little bit. I love to answer questions. Those questions can be anything about me and my life, what you know, what you don't know. I first mentioned I'm a foster parent, I also have a son who's biological, and it can be about this book specifically. So I am opening up the floor to make this a two-way conversation. If anyone wants to go first. Yeah, and can you say your name?
My name's Bree.
Bree, good to meet you.
You too. What was the process like of having to rehash through that with Eric?
Yeah, that's a great question. She asked what the process was like rehashing it with my husband when you're right on that.
Yeah,
so,
when you're right.
Yeah, even though, to some people, 6 years being removed from infidelity isn't a lot of time. It's not in the grand scheme of life, but we felt ready. So I did that with full permission and his endorsement. We were ready basically to use that to get glory to God, because God is all glory in all of that. A lot of, we still go to therapy. We probably always will. We're just big therapy people. We're proactive in that. But we actually have a spiritual director through my church. So I have a church in LA called I attend a church in LA called New Abbey, and I'm on spiritual director through there. She's in her 60s, And she just is so wise and witty and real with me. And like, she doesn't tell me what I want to hear. She just shoots me straight. I love that. We met with her a lot during, the book had already been written, but as far as the process before it came out publicly and before we came out publicly, she was really helpful in just being like a sounding board and a safe place for the process. But Eric has been phenomenal. He has been really great. Does he ever get triggered? Probably, but he's handling it really, really well. And you know, it's out there now. There's no going back. Neither of us have regrets because it's a sad thing to tell you this, but I'm going to say it. We probably hear now from at least 3 to 5 couples a day that are navigating a form of integrity or trust breaking. I won't say infidelity, but just whether it's like, I caught my husband looking at porn again, and like, this is an ongoing struggle for us, or so many different things. I think by us being willing to go first, it has allowed people to feel so much less alone and to give them hope that, oh, you know, this is a struggle in my relationship right now, but me and Eric are, you know, 7 years down the road, and now they're using it, and it's not a present struggle. That probably, like, I think it's felt really good and given them a lot of hope. And one other thing I'll say, I'm a talker. One other thing I'll say is that the redemption that I want to highlight in this book is not that my marriage stayed together. Although that's beautiful redemption, and I'm so thankful. The redemption is that God healed me. The redemption is that I don't struggle the way that I did. That the void that probably will always be there, which when you read the story, you'll understand a little more of my childhood. Again, I don't hear that to justify or behavior, but just to give you context that a lack of a father figure in your life can create some voids that make sense of my struggles. But now I know what to do. I don't put all of my happiness into Eric's hands and say, you have to. That can only be, I can only find security and happiness in God. And it's not only been obviously very healing and very redemptive for me, but it also is really great for my marriage. Like, what a load of pressure off. I talk about unsexy wedding vows in this book because I talk about how, you know, wedding vows are also pretty. I was really proud of them. If I do it all again, they'd be a lot less sexy and they'd be a lot more real. Thanks for asking that question. I'll give you one you already for. Anyone else? Yeah, can you say your name? Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Sometimes I tell a lot of stories and not give all the stuff. It's all in here. But the steps were confession to a mentor and my husband, a lot of counseling, and throughout the rest of the book, I share with you, outside of just having pastoral and a mentor and counseling support, there's just a lot that I began to do. I began to question and dig a layer deeper. That's one of the slower practices. Dig a layer deeper, get to the root behind everything. Why do I not like that person on social media? Why am I feeling jealous? Not just, oh, unfollow, that didn't, I don't like this. I probably take integrity so far now that it's maybe a little bit silly. But part of my healing is not to, how do I say that? I think it's slowing down and inviting discernment into everything. And not just staying on the surface, not just saying, I don't like them, I'm just going to follow them. But really having a process of, okay, what does that show? What is that maybe reflecting in me that I don't like? Or if somebody upsets me. I'm an Enneagram 8, if you're into the Enneagram, I talk about how that in the book. It's been a helpful tool of self-awareness for me. I now know that my gut reaction to a lot of things is conflict, attack. And I've learned that sometimes the best thing to do is to pull back, to sit with it, to bring in that discernment, either one-on-one or between myself and God, or even inviting a mentor or a counselor or a pastor. Some of the other healing steps, very practical and basic. I actually have, I won't try to find it, I should have tabbed it, I apologize. I share in one chapter specifically the ways that you can invest in yourself that are free, that are inexpensive, and that are a more hefty investment. And I do, not all the time, but some from each of those categories all the time. So one of the healing things that's a free way that Eric and I pursue our healing journey as a married couple is we ask each other 3 questions every Sunday night. And it's a ritual we have. It's a habit we've created. And I won't say all 3 questions, but one of those questions is there anything that is weighing on your chest that you're feeling convicted about that you want to share with me? As you now have heard parts of our story, it makes sense why we would now build that question into our regular rhythm. But here's what I want to say. Had that question been a part of our life and had radical honesty and transparency been a part of our relationship from the get-go, we might have avoided the mistake. It could have been almost like a preventative, proactive measure, which is what it is today. It's a point where, and we've had to work really hard to create such a safe and gracious environment that it goes well and doesn't result in, you're living on the couch. But it's a place where he can say, he wouldn't mind if I share this, I'll share this. It's a place where he can say, hey babe, saw something on Instagram, I clicked on it, it'll let me down a rabbit hole of some images I should look at. Do you know how hard that is to hear? It's really hard. It doesn't feel good. But I've also become healthy enough to know it's not about me. I don't lack anything. It doesn't make me feel insecure. And that by saying it out loud, by him saying what he's struggling with out loud, same as me, when we say those things out loud, the things that come to us struggling, they lose their power. Because shame grows in secrecy. Secrecy is breeding grounds for shame. And so we've developed, that's just one small practice that I share in the book that has been a step towards healing for us. I use it with friends. Gosh, yeah, I could go on and on. I'm probably giving like so much of the book away that you're like not interested anymore. But hopefully it actually just clarifies. It is this interesting thing where it has everything to do with stuff nobody else can see. It's an invitation to stop striving to be perfect or appear perfect, because that actually is counterproductive. There's a chapter called You're Already Good. And I've had some Christians be like, oh, we're not really out God. I'm like, wait, don't come at me. Hear me out. I spent so much of my life believing I wasn't good and I needed to be good, try to be good, and strive to be good, and be perceived as good. But I actually missed out on just being good in the way that I am, which is we are all good. We are made in God's image. And that when we live from that place of believing we're actually good, that's so much healthier and brings about more wholeness and love and fruits of the spirit in this world out of us than spending all of our days striving to measure up and be good and be perceived as good. Hopefully not as stupid, but there's a lot to say about it. Yeah, in the back. Hi, do you say Michelle? Michelle with an N. Awesome, I love that name. Yeah, I love that. Definitely can read with a spouse. And if you have, I just got this question because I had at my Southland event, I had some teen girls that their mommy will meet ahead of time. I would say a mature 13 to 14-year-old could handle it. There's nothing, even in the parts of infidelity that I talked about. Sorry if you're looking forward to this. There's no sex scenes. There's no juicy stuff that you're going to read. In fact, I was so grateful that my editor at Baker, Stephanie Smith, she said, Manda, your job is just to tell the truth. I'll help you. She said, feel free to make a mess on the pages. That was the permission she gave me. It was so helpful. So I was like, how do I tell them? I just figured write it all out. And then she helped me like delete certain things. It's like, does that really serve a purpose, or is it just a juicy detail that people like to take or something? Like it doesn't really serve a purpose. We kind of got rid of some of that. So all of that space definitely appropriate. I don't know how old of a teen. I grew up really fast because of stuff, unfortunate things in my childhood. So I would have been ready for something like this, I think at 13, 14 years old. Some of it might have been over my head, but I don't think there's ever anything wrong with us starting a conversation with our kids about what's going on inside. There's also a mental health aspect to this book that I probably should have brought up. I'll bring it up very briefly here. And that is the reason we put to save your life is this journey with Jesus for me of caring for my soul saved my life. You will read in this book, I think we all know by now mental health doesn't discriminate, that it can look like a lot of different things. I got to a point after I had made the mistake in my marriage to the spirit for almost 11 months, sadly. I was so ashamed and I was so afraid. That day after day, I thought, I'm better off dead. And ideas of what that looks like came in my mind. I had a lot of intrusive thoughts. I was on medication, and medication is not bad. Thank God for it. But for me, a lot of the healing came through confession, and the time between that and actually confessing were the darkest days of my life, and I didn't want to be there anymore. And I wake up now to this life that is so beautiful. I wake up every day now to a life that I'm so proud of, and I'm so thankful I'm here to live. And the thought that I almost didn't get to be here to do it because I thought no one would love me anymore if they knew how. I'm not saying that everyone who struggles with mental health or everyone who's died by suicide has had something that they're hiding. That's not my. I wonder if we all were living lives in the light, transparent lives of light, and we were honest with each other. Like, my marriage is not good right now, or I don't like my kids very much, or I'm hating being a stay-at-home mom, or I'm whatever the case is. If we were that radically honest with each other, how much less alone would we feel in our stuff? How much more likely would we be to actually come out in big and small? So I put the hotline number in there for people that do feel like they're better off dead. You know, that's really like one, but I think it matters that much that we put in the title because it is about your life. And even if you're living, if you're hiding, you're not really living. You're not really. So. Sorry for the emotional moment. Yeah, this book is every big thing I learned in my 20s. Just turned 30, I'll be honest, my age. Not a wise age, I don't try to think age. But I do think I've walked through a lot of junk. And I learned a lot. And if I can make it a little lighter, a little brighter, a little easier on someone else, then I'm willing to do that. Yes.
And then my second question.
Oh, sorry, that was only your first question. You're right, like going on. Can you repeat that one more time? Make sure I caught it.
How long did you like? Got it for a while. How did that work?
No, I was trying to write a different book because I've always been a writer. So I knew I wanted to be published. I wanted to write a book. I just didn't want to write this book. I wanted to write any book. My first book is a devotional I mentioned, it's a self-published devotional called Faith, an invitation to create sustainable rhythms for play and rest. That's the short self-published book that I wrote that was a journey back to beyond in 2018, completely like separate, but it incorporated in this journey as well. That's a book where it was like, oh, I navigated this and I want to tell everyone about it. And I was excited and proud and I knew it changed their life and it felt easy because I didn't have to expose really anything super bad. This book, on the other hand, getting to the point where I was writing this book was a journey. In total, some of you maybe know this, but I was actually with a different publisher before Baker. We will not name them. I don't want it to seem like I'm talking badly, but it was a really unfortunate thing. I announced that Soul Care to Save Your Life would be coming out February 2021. They had me announced August 2020, with the book coming out February 2021. And 48 hours after I announced, we started taking pre-orders. We hit #1 on Amazon in our category for a new release. It's all exciting. I'm getting celebratory emails from our faces there. I get the book I didn't want to write, that I resisted, that God made it very clear I needed to write. I obeyed. I announced it, and now you're going to give one? It was this weird thing where I got to tell you, I felt two things at the same time: relief and hopelessness. Relief because I was like, another day goes by and I don't have to tell the world about that. But then there was this like hopelessness feeling because well, how can I effectively reach a lot of people and hopefully help them in some way? I'm a writer, casting your book, what does it look like? So it was a journey. I ended up having my son the week that my book was supposed to come out. So total God thing in the end that I wasn't releasing my book. I think I had my son early. And we transitioned the foster kids that we had in our care for 2 years to their adoptive family. And there was just like new life and grief and a lot going on. And so I can truly say now that the timing of this, from a personal standpoint, feels so much more divine. I don't even know if I answered your question, honestly, because I'm just grateful. But this book wasn't the book I set out to write, but was the book I could not write. That I knew God was saying, go there, go all the way there, take it too far. Don't follow the Christian formula, like go there and trust me. That's what I did. Yes, and name.
Hannah.
Hannah.
Yeah, hi. I was just wondering, because you did foster.
Yes.
So how did you and your husband know that you were ready to start doing that?
I'm so glad you asked the question because no one asked about the Southside event, and it's like the thing I love talking about. So it's one thing to recover a marriage from infidelity. It's a whole other thing to be foster parents or to be parents at all. And what I will say is that I don't think anyone, foster parenting or biologically, like becoming a parent, being a parent in any sense, I'm not sure you're ever ready. And you'll hear that from time to time, especially if you're newly married. People are like, they have babies, and you're just like, I don't know, we're not ready yet. They'll say, well, you'll never be ready. My answer to that is, no, actually, there are times where you're more ready and things in life is more settled. So that's not entirely true. For us, we always knew, I always knew I was going to be a foster parent, and if you read the book, you'll know the why behind all of that. Sure, we'll go to that publicly, based on my own childhood. But Eric also knew, like, it's not like I sprung that on him when we got married. In our dating relationship, it was a non-negotiable. Like, hey, just so you know, I'm probably not having bio kids. But I am going to be a foster parent, and so that's not the deal that we should be dating. Fast forward, continue to date, got engaged, got married, and kind of all things and it was really hard. The way that we navigated when we were actually ready for that, again, to the outsider, it might seem fast, but like under a year of dealing with that and actually like getting licensed. But we were already in the process of getting licensed, and we did put it on pause for a minute. It was like, whoa, we need to figure this out. But when we knew that we were choosing each other, like, and again, it's hard to make sense of it, but that my infidelity was not because I didn't want to be with him. And that his response to all of that was, I actually do want to be married to her, and I want to figure this out as long as she can heal and we can do it together. When two people decide to come towards each other and turn towards each other in that, the healing journey is a lot smoother than you may think. Doesn't mean we didn't have hard conversations, or that there weren't nights that ended in a lot of tears. I don't want to paint like a rose colored picture or over romanticize it. But it was pretty quickly that we were like, okay, so this is going to be an ongoing thing that we need to discuss. And I'm going to keep going to individual counseling. We're going to keep being a marriage counseling, but should we now not say yes to kids and their families, or do you think that this could be something, another point where we actually come together and we're more united and we're on a mission together? And that actually might be good for our marriage. And so we practiced a lot with our counselor, and she really affirmed all of that. Was like, you know, there isn't, and if anyone even tries to give you, there isn't, and if anyone tries to give you a very formulaic, this is how you navigate this. Every relationship is different. So for us and the specifics, because there are no two marriages that are the same or relationships that are the same, there are no two sources of fidelity that are the same. There are so many different things that can motivate a person. And so in our particular case, we felt like we got to a place sort of like he was confident in me telling the truth and doing the work and staying accountable and in light that, hey, we should like resume our life. And yeah, I'm so glad. We fostered 16 kids in 4.5 years. Those weren't all individual places. We had, I think, 7 places. Some were 3 kids at one time, 4 kids at one time. And then now we live in LA and we're licensed and the bed is in science room, we're ready to go. And the only thing we told our coach worker was, I'm launching a book, so I might not be able to give everything I need to a kid and their family. We like jump right back in. So I think we'll probably step back in and accept a placement before the year is over, but we want to do it wisely. We've had to build a whole new community and support system in LA, which I think we've done pretty fast. It's only been a year. We feel very supportive. That's good. But fostering is a way, it's a lifestyle for us at this point. I think we'll always have seasons where we take breaks, just like we did for the first 17 months of child's life now. But I think I see it as our lifestyle. I see it as a mission that we feel both called to be on together. Probably more than we want. It's free, right?
Yeah. How do you think, like, spitballing, your relationship, both you and Eric's relationship with Shia as he grows and asks questions about this, he hears about that, how do you want to approach that, I guess?
Yeah, I thought about that a lot. Like, oh shoot, my foster kid. I have my 17-year-old type thing was like, I got your book. I was like, oh, I got really nervous, but I was excited. But I thought a lot about that with Shia, with our other kids. Like, I don't want them to come across like I feel proud of the mistakes I made. There is not pride for the bad that I've done, the stuff. There's so much pride for being able to be like, when I talk about God's grace, this is what I'm talking about. And I'm really excited that with Shia in particular, that was more the question. People know that his mom and dad are not perfect people, and we don't expect perfection from him. And then just like we give grace to each other all the time, daily, hourly, sometimes by the minute, it feels like it's really hard. Right? That same grace will be given to him. We want him to know he can help anything, and that it will be a safe space. We may not always agree with it. We may not endorse it. We may not want that behavior, that thing to continue, but that we are going to love him, and that if there's ever a question of whether or not, if he ever gets to a point like I did, where it's truth or death, and I think I've got to go first. And can you say to Chris,
did anybody just turn their back on you Wednesday? No family like his mom, mother-in-law.
I would love to share one quick thing on that. No, they didn't, and here's why. When we went to counseling, so we got into our counseling office the next day. The day I confessed to Eric, it was like 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That was just like crappy thing. A lot of tears. I can kind of go back there in my mind, but it's honestly repressed a little bit because it's such a bad night, right? And I actually write a little bit about the first words out of Eric's mouth, though, because that's really beautiful. So it's a nuanced thing. But we went to our counselor the very next day. Basically, Eric emailed her with like, we want a session. It's urgent. It's really important. We need it. And so she got it. And one of the things that she said pretty early on was, Eric, do you want to navigate this towards reconciliation? Or do you want to navigate this towards, ending the relationship? Now, she's a Christian counselor, so she was rooting for us and wanted us to be able to work through it. And she saw, and he knew, I expressed it, like, I'm a screwed up person, but I love you. I don't want to be with anyone else. And so it wasn't like I had made a mistake and I was like, I don't want to be married to you anymore, which happens a lot in here. That was not our story. So we knew I wanted to be with him. We go to counseling. She asked him if he wants to work through reconciliation and healing as well. And he said, yeah. He was skeptical. He was like, I can't be married to someone if this is going to be like an ongoing thing. I can't, my heart can't take this over and over again. And so she said, well, I'm going to tell you one thing right away. I do not want you to run. She said, I'm not asking you to keep it a secret. She did not ask us to keep it a secret. I don't want you to run to family or certain friends that for two reasons. Number one, she was talking to Eric, you are in an emotionally fragile state. The last thing you need is to now go and care for somebody else's emotion. And until you can tell someone that's close to you to where their reaction will not impact your decision, you're not ready. So I encourage you to think of 3 people. It can be a friend, but someone that is in a healthy place that's not going to bring drama and bring their emotional side, up with you. Because the last thing you need to do is pastor, a mentor, and so he saw those things out, and he was gracious enough to say to me who those 3 that he named were, and was I okay with them? Which was very kind because he did not believe any of that. And then the same was true for me. She said, which I wasn't the one that she had to worry about. I didn't want to tell anyone, right? Like it did take me a long time to work up the courage to even tell him. But she said, you need to have your people. Who are they going to be? And really be wise thinking that through. And I wrote that in the book. I think it's one of the things that helps have a much smoother healing journey. Because had he that night called his mom and said, this happened, she probably, I don't know what she would have done. I can imagine. She probably would have drove to Chicago. Yeah, like it would not have been good. Instead, you're kind of got to wait several years after he had several years to tell her. So, and it was hard. It was still really hard to tell them. But I think that my mother-in-law today, that's an easy one to bring up because you can all imagine maybe what she was feeling, anger and sadness for her son. And I hurt her very badly. She responded with so much grace because what her and my father-in-law both said was, you could be coming to us today saying, this happened and we're getting divorced, or which that happened, or this happened and we never really worked through. I don't know. They were proud of what they focused on was, wow, we wish we could have been there for you, but we understand why you didn't share it with us. And we're just so proud of how far you've come and the way that you've navigated it. And they said, we see the life you're living and the mission you're on, and the way that you're following Jesus and the good that you two as a couple are doing in the world. And we're so thankful that you chose grace and didn't choose to throw in the towel on the marriage. And that meant a lot. But then there were also moments in the days that followed where my mother was feeling really, really angry. I just to be honest, like, can I ask a few questions? Sure, I might not answer all of your questions. Eric and I aren't. We told you pretty much what we want you to know, but I'm happy to share a little bit more if it's helpful. And so one of the things she said was, how did I not know? And I said, well, just like your son didn't know, I didn't get caught. I came forward. As we've had so many conversations, but actually, like most things in life, all of this has really brought us closer. I feel very close to my mom. I think the best relationships, and even if you don't have your friendships, the ones that are the best aren't usually the ones that have never endured a hardship or ever have had a hard conversation. Those are great. We love those friends, those relationships. Those are fun and easy. But the ones that you tend to feel the most intimate and close and real and connected to are the ones where there has been some hard conversations. There has been some stuff you had to work through. So I think the vulnerability in us sharing cultivated intimacy, and now we're very close. I'm so grateful. And actually, they were so sweet. They bought like 1 million copies. And they were giving them to everyone. And they're like, you know, it was like scary for them to share with their friends and loved ones, but they were like, what God's redemption, like this is so cool. And yeah, they saw the fruit, the reason why someone would want to come out about this. Yes, and please hear me. I'm Abby. I think once you start questioning your motives and you do the deep inner work, and you actually, for me, one of the things I did was I stopped doing like everything, and I wanted to rebuild it from scratch. So instead of just reading my Bible because I was told that's what I should do, I stopped and I reevaluated. And then it was like, okay, when I read my Bible, I'm not always going to post my time. I'm certainly not always going to, like I used to literally check a box. And maybe you still do that, and that's okay. I was such like a regimented person, but it was no longer a relationship, it was just you. And so I had to like really pull back and say, okay, I'm gonna quit everything. I'm gonna rebuild my faith from scratch. And one of the ways that I've been able to do that is in my relationship with God, I talk out loud to God. I probably talk out loud to God more. You might think I'm crazy. And I used to think that prayer had to look a certain way, that the eyes had to be closed, that now I'm at the Shia and I'm like praying while we're walking. And sometimes there are words out of your mouth, sometimes it's internal, but the living conscious of what's motivating me, and not doing because I think I should, or because others expect it of me, or because I want them to know that about me, but rather just wanting to experience the fruit that comes from a relationship with God. Less striving and more surrendering. I wrote a lot more about it in the book, but I go back and like trying not to be so long. I mean, I hang out with you all. Probably have. Yes. Haley.
Against him. So, life has been one shame from the past. How does he navigate that now that everything knows? You as a woman wanting to share to be like, oh, look at all the good that's come, how amazing he is through it without shaming him.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think he would tell you that he is happy to share with people something I kind of said earlier, that no two marriages are alike, no two stories of infidelity are alike. And he wasn't a perfect person, because none of us are. There's definitely things that we also, as we healed, we also reevaluated. It was like, do I prioritize my friends over Amanda sometimes? Ooh, I should probably organize. There were things he took responsibility for, still didn't justify, like, I can't steal about friends, right? That doesn't work. But there were things he changed too. And so he's happy to share with people his side of it, of she took responsibility, she did the work and continues to do the work to heal. This is what that looks like. But also men or partners, whoever, if you're married, and he can give a little context to, man, what does it look like to prioritize yourself, to make them feel seen, to love them the way they need to feel loved, to not be selfish. And so he's happy to do that. To know Eric gets to know there's about nothing that embarrasses him. He is, he's no book. So, and it's funny, women, we're like tend to be more talkers. And so, one of my closest friends still hasn't said anything to us about it. And he's actually said to them, like, hey, I don't think we have to talk about it, but I just want you to know, like, we can talk about it. I think he's now used to the vulnerability that we have, both with each other and with friends and mentors and whatnot, But I think a lot of men are still terrified of vulnerability and intimacy at that level. So he's the one saying to friends like, hey, we can talk about porn with each other. We can open up about this. And I think he's support that very much. Any other questions? Thank you for everything you brought. Cool. I think Becky's gonna come up here and then I'll go by the books and we can hang, take breaks, time. I don't know. You're probably tail.